Shar, thank you very much for that great introduction. Jamie, thank you for inviting me to play. I saw the program here. Pretty cool day to have, or a couple days to have Seth Waugh, Chris Como, just incredible. Kevin Duffy, I've met Kevin a few years ago. He was training Lee Westwood in the gym at Old Palm when I first met him, and Westwood went from being a guy that you would have said not quite in good shape to one of the most fit guys and still being competitive around the world. So I'm happy to be here. I've never been out to Temecula before. This is spectacular. What a spot. And I'm honored that, Jamie, you would ask me to do this. I'm new to this world of instruction. I've been doing a little bit of teaching the last few years, but I've always been interested in the mechanics of the golf swing and about making people better. So today out here, I want this to be interactive. If you have any questions, if you think about something, react to it, raise your hand. I'd like to do it that way rather than being so formal and wait until the end. I also will tell you that I had a tremendous influence in my career from Bob Rotella, the sports psychologist that you all would know. And he said when he first spoke in front of the Maryland Golf Association, the PGA there, that he started the day by saying, how many of you still like to play golf? And most of the instructors raised their hands. How many of you know more about the golf swing now than you knew when you were a kid? Everybody raised their hands. How many of you are better teachers now than you were a few years ago? Everybody raised their hand. How many of you can get up on the first hole and hit it down the middle of the fairway on the first swing? Nobody raised their hand. I want today to be something when you walk away from here, you're a better putter when you walk away. I don't necessarily think more information is good for players. It's how you disseminate that information that's really good for players and what's going to help them. And my experience teaching is really more with elite players. It's not with the average golfer. So that's where I would fail. I'm probably less knowledgeable about technique than most instructors. And I would definitely say that just because you were good at a skill like putting or golf doesn't mean you're necessarily a great instructor or a teacher or a coach. Would Tiger Woods or Jack Nicklaus be great instructors? I think they have a wealth of information. They can tell you what they did, and that's what I've learned over my career is most players will tell you what they do, right? I got a swing tip, you got to move off the ball like Jimmy Ballard. Oh, I got a swing tip, you got to stay on your left side like Andy Plummer. So I try not to have a bias to what I teach. I have a few, and I think my message throughout this day is going to be that, look, as much as we are learning about technology, what we can find out when we measure a player when they move and the subtle movements in a putting stroke, it's still a game that we have to play, and it's still an object of getting the ball in the hole as quickly as we can. And that's kind of where I want to come at this from. I've had a couple like really influential moments in my life, and one of them came in the mid-'80s in Orlando. There was an instructor named Gary Smith who worked for Dave Ledbetter. He's an English guy. Gary was working for ABC at the time, and he had a big video camera back when they were the ones on your shoulder. I think it was maybe even 8-track. And Crenshaw was on the Palm putting green on the back, and Gary desperately wanted video of Crenshaw's putting stroke. Now, it was right after he had won the 85 Masters. It was that fall. And I was living down there in Orlando, and Gary asked me, hey, would you ask Ben if I could video his stroke? Now, you can imagine as a 24-year-old going up to a Masters champion, he might have known who I was, but he didn't know much about me. And I asked him, and it was really late in the day. There was nobody else around. And I said, Mr. Crenshaw, he goes, call me Ben, as you would imagine Ben would say. Gary Smith's an instructor for Ledbetter. He is desperate to see if he can get some videos of your putting stroke. And Crenshaw was gracious as you would expect. And Gary started to roll camera. And Crenshaw said, you know, it's funny, I'm not putting very well right now. And I thought, first of all, it was amazing that Ben Crenshaw would ever tell anybody that he wasn't putting well, and that a player as great as Ben, who had won the Masters a few months earlier, would admit to some rookie that he wasn't putting well. Because Harvey Penick, his instructor, and I think you would say this, Mr. Ernst, did he say to go to dinner with putters that are good putters, right? And that was a great line, and I still believe that. But Crenshaw said, yeah, he said, I feel like I'm hitting at the ball, I'm not hitting through the ball. That was kind of hard to figure out what that meant. These were feels that Ben had. It was sort of esoteric. How do you define that? And I said, well, what do you do? And Gary's got the camera rolling. What do you do when you're not putting well? And he said to me, he goes, well, a couple things. I try to make my stroke longer and my follow through shorter, and I try to let my head and my knees move. Kind of the opposite. You know, we've been told head down, still, take it back low, slow, follow through and accelerate. And Ben Crenshaw was telling me the opposite. So he said, it's okay to let your head and your knees move, and it's okay to take the putter back longer than you follow through. Opposite anything we've heard. So then he started to hit a few putts, and it was obvious. He watched his stroke many times. You know, he looped lined it up on the toe, really open with his shoulders, left shoulder way forward. Putter went back in and around, kind of hit it out on the toe, had a big loop. He'd be in anybody's top 5 list of greatest putters in the world, right? And so that allowed me to feel like when I putted that I could stay more relaxed, and it was okay if my head and knees moved. And a young player walked on the green, John Houston, who was a great Bermuda grass greens putter. And he said, just watch John hit a few putts right here. And I watched John hit a few putts, and you could just see a subtle movement in his knee as he was hitting his knees, as he was hitting a few longer putts. And as Ben said, he said, this is a mini swing. There's got to be movement, there's got to be weight shift. It allowed me to feel like for the rest of my life, rest of my career, that I could have soft arms, I could let my head and knees move. I didn't have to be perfect. And to me, I had a marked increase in my putting stats. Now back then, putting stats were very different. It was putts per round, and it was putts per green in regulation, right? So we didn't have strokes gained putting. So I was a kind of a middle of the road putter my first few years, and I guess if you wanted to get under my skin right away, and I don't know, Barlow probably would do that, he's out here. You know, you're lucky you're just born a good putter, right? So that would discount all the work I did when I was a young kid practicing on the putting greens. And I distinctly remember my putting stats getting much better after meeting Ben Crenshaw because I felt like I could relax. A few years later, when Scotty Cameron came to the Titleist family, when I first saw my putting stroke on video, and like Crenshaw, I had a little bit of loop. I took it back 2 straight, out over the top, dragged the putter across. So working with Scotty Cameron, getting my putter back on a better arc, really helped my putting stats, and that's when my stats got the best, when I got to be in the top. I think I was in the top 10 in putting for 11 years in a row, which is great. So how does this help you? So when I was a kid, I grew up in Rhode Island on an old Donald Ross course. These greens were tiny. They all sloped back to front, and as a young kid, we knew over a Donald Ross green was bad. But when I was caddying, on Saturday and Sunday mornings, there was always dew on the green, so every time a player hit a putt, your member that you were caddying for, you could see the action track. You could see the line the ball took. And ever since those young days, I've had that sort of image in my mind about what a putt should do. And when I have had caddies at clubs read greens for me, I was constantly amazed at how people never read enough break in their putts. So Dave Pelz, one of the great instructors of the game and of our history, really, who really specialized before anybody else in short game, talked to me about putting a long time ago, and he gave me a fantastic drill that's helped me forever, and it would be great on big greens like this with a lot of speed and a lot of slope. Is he said, if you want to practice learning how to read greens, hit long putts and try to stop the ball short and above the hole. Short and above the hole. So if I was going to put myself under the gun here and go to that long green. How close can you get it? And you would lose a point or $1 or whatever you'd play for if you hit it past the hole or if you hit it below the hole. So when players go to Augusta, this is a great way to practice. So not bad. Not bad. So you can have contests with that forever. That's pretty good for a first try. So as I started playing a little bit more golf, one of my closest friends was Davis Love. And Davis, you know, as good a player as he was, I think he would even say today that, you know, his struggles were more on the greens than they were tee to green. And we were in Hawaii one year practicing. He says, will you watch me? And this is maybe late 90s. We might have had cell phone cameras, but they weren't very good. And maybe we had a video camera, but we tried an experiment. And granted, we didn't have a lot of technology. So I had somebody film us on a 15-foot putt. And we hit the putt at the same time. So we were both in the camera, in the frame. And it was funny, we both started our stroke. My putter went back 3 or 4 inches farther than his did, and I hit the ball before he did. So that kind of went back to show me something like Crenshaw had said. There's got to be some symmetry of the motion here, right, going back and through. The putter goes back a longer way than most people have been taught, and there doesn't have to be a huge change in the transition and a huge hit or acceleration to the ball. And as I got to be a better and better putter, I got asked to endorse a lot of products. One of them was a grip company a few years ago. What's the name of the grip Justin Rose uses? It's a big flat cat? Flat cat. So I had his agent called me up, Mark Steinberg, and he said, Brad, we got this guy in Cleveland's invented this grip. Would you like to endorse this grip? And I'd kind of retired, really. I was still playing some on the senior tour. And this grip was monster with big side edges. And I tried it. I didn't even have to try it. I just looked at it. I said, Mark, I really can't endorse this. How can I play this game my whole life and all of a sudden say this grip changed my career, changed my putting and made it better? So he goes, well, you got to send it back. I go, why? He goes, we only had 2 grips. So we sent it back, and I saw about 2 weeks later, Hank Haney's probably made $1 million representing the fat cat. So, and Justin Rose actually uses it, but turns it the wrong way, right? So it's, I can't even imagine what he did. So when Blast came along, Blast was the first little device that I saw that was usable, not like Sam or not like Quintec, that you could carry around with you when you played. You could get quick measurements, and it's inexpensive. You can put it on any club. But what I really liked was I could use this in a practice round or in my Pro-Am, keep it on my putter. All the data was time stamped. When I went back, I could see what my stroke looked like, and I could see what it was like on my short putts. I could tell if it was my par putts. I could tell if it was my longer putts and how it changed. And now I know most of you would know what Blast does. We'll put some information up there in a little bit. But you guys are the first ones that I've said, this is pretty nice and this is pretty doable for me and for anybody that I teach. And what I really think is odd is everybody goes to get instruction when they're playing their worst, don't they? Right? I saw a few nods there. Does anybody ever go get a lesson when you're playing great? Doesn't make sense. But what you should do is get your numbers, whether you use Blast or some other technology, and I would recommend this for full swing as well, is get your information when you're playing your best because you have something to go back to. I don't know if Charlene Shar, when she introduced me, if she mentioned the 100 teachers I've had lessons from in my life. I'm still searching, right? But I've had a lot of them. And one of my top instructors was Jim McLean. And in the early 90s, Jim McLean worked with Peter Jacobson and Tom Kite. And Tom Kite, and by the way, this is before technology, before TrackMan, before he knew a lot about launch and spin. Kite had come to Doral in 1991 when he won the championship. And he had video of Kite hitting shots. And he was really hitting the driver well. Now, we're using early on metal woods, he was probably still using wood, and they were looking at trajectory. And back then, you know, he was hitting higher launch, lower spinning drivers. They were going a long way. And Kite, one of the best wedge players that ever played, was hitting lower launched, higher spinning wedges. And he won Doral. I think he won Doral that year by a few shots. When he came back to Doral in '92, he was hitting low spinny drives and high knuckly wedges. So they went back to work, looked at some old film, and he went on to win the US Open at Pebble Beach in 1992. So having that information when you're playing your best is great to have. Really important, having old film. So don't always go to somebody when you're playing bad. Go there when you're playing well and keep that information. That can really help you, your feels. I always wrote down feels, thoughts, what I was doing with my swing, and I thought that helped. When somebody comes to me for a lesson, I have certain things I want to do, but I want to entertain you with one story, because really what happened with Rory McIlroy helped Rory, but it helped me to become better known, have people like Jamie ask me to come and blab for an hour. So McIlroy lives down where I live near Jupiter, Florida. His dad's a member at Seminole. And Seminole is one of the great clubs in the world, and they have a pro member every year that may have the best field in golf. Arnold Palmer used to play with Tim Neer, and every year Rory plays with his dad. Now I had heard rumors that Rory was struggling with his putting and he was going to call me, and we were at Seminole, and this was 2018 in the spring. It's right after the Honda Classic. And Billy Andrade, who's my partner in the Andrade at Faxon and the CBS Charity Classic, we wanted Rory desperately to come play in our tournament. We wanted Justin Thomas. We were out there recruiting. We were sales guys. And we're sitting out on the patio watching Adam Scott about to tee off when Rory and his dad came out of the locker room, and we pounced on him. And he's so polite and so nice. And we were watching Adam Scott down on the tee, and Adam Scott got up to the top of his swing, and he did this. And we're going, oh my God, that's George Gangas. And Gangas had met Adam Scott on the range at Riviera. And Rory said, can you believe that? He went to see Gangas with that swing. And Rory said, I don't think about an effing thing when I swing my driver. And it was funny to hear Rory say that. So 2018 in March, I'm out here playing in the Toshiba Classic down in Newport Beach. And I got a text when I was finished on Saturday from a 561 area code number that I didn't have. It said, hey Brad, it's Rory McIlroy. I'm gonna be at Old Palm, where I live in Palm Beach Gardens, playing at Ernie Els' autism event. And I'd like to know if you could watch me hit some putts on Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock. So I was playing in Newport Beach, California. As you can imagine, there's not a lot of ways to get home. You can fly a red eye, or you can fly early in the morning, and it's a day-wasting flight. And I had booked a first-class JetBlue flight on Monday morning. It's a lie-down seat. It's, you know, I got it for a great price. You know, I still care about that, you know. And I was getting into Fort Lauderdale on Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock. So here's like one of the greatest players in the world asking for a putting lesson, and he wanted to meet me Monday at 4 o'clock at the Bears Club, where he practices and plays and lives. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? So I don't respond. I get back to the hotel, get on the computer, check all the flights for overnight flights, find an American flight to Miami. Certainly wasn't the price I was paying. The conservative New England in mind, I cheaped out, and I flew back that night to land about 5 o'clock in the morning. I said, Rory, I'll meet you at the Bears Club at 4. So I called my wife, and I said, hey, honey, I'm changing plans. I'm coming home tomorrow morning. She goes, why? And I said, well, McIlroy called. He wants a putting lesson. And she goes, wait a minute. You're coming home for Rory McIlroy, but you wouldn't do that for me? And I said, exactly. She goes, that means you like Rory more than me? I said, right now I do, yes. So I changed my flight, and everybody here, I'm guessing everybody here has given a lesson before, right? You'd be nervous about this one, excited about this one, and hoping that you could help a player that's been struggling, where his statistics, he was outside the top 140 in strokes gained putting for 3 consecutive years, and had worked with one of the top putting instructors named Phil Kenyon, who teaches Justin Rose before, Molinari, who just won the British Open, Gary Woodland, who just won the US Open. So Kenyon had a wealth of knowledge. And I was trying to think about, what am I going to say to this guy? And I had my backpack, my iPad, that's what I use for my camera, and I didn't really have any technology. And I said, I got to get him right. I got to hook him, or he's not gonna like what I have to say. So I said, you remember standing on the patio at Seminole, and you said you saw Adam Scott swing, and Adam didn't think about an effing thing. I said, would you be okay playing a great round of golf and putting unbelievably well, but you had no idea what you did? And he exhaled, he goes, I'd die to do that. I would die to do that. So if you think about the best rounds you've ever played, or the best rounds players have ever played, and you just looked at maybe the transcript of their press conference, what did they say after they played great? Felt easy today. I didn't have to think about anything. I just saw the shot. I pictured everything. I had great feel, I had great touch. It's not very complicated, is it? So what can you tell someone when they have a flaw in their mechanics, or a flaw in their routine, or whatever you're watching? How do you get them to eliminate multiple thoughts? And you've probably never had any teacher any student come to you saying, I need more to think about, I need to try harder, I always play better in competition, I never putt good when it doesn't matter. So that's what I was trying to hope to get across to Rory. And I mean, it was one of the greatest things I've ever seen. So when I try to give somebody a lesson for the first time, we went out to the putting green after about 15 minutes of having a cup of coffee, and told a little bit about my philosophy and what I wanted to see. I videoed him from the face on and then from down the line, and I could see a golfer full of thoughts. I could see a golfer that was thinking about everything that he had to think about to make this stroke. And you would know that when you play badly, it's easy to explain what you do incorrectly. You could talk about your bad rounds, what you were thinking, what you were feeling. When you play great, it's hard to even put some of those words into the English language when you play your best. And players that do great in any sport, they struggle with that. And that's where you want to be when you're playing this game, when you're trying to shoot your lowest scores, when you're playing and trying to win major championships or player of the year. And players come with all different problems. Rory was thinking about 100 things. You have some players like Patrick Cantley, who Jamie's done a magnificent job with, who is a tough guy to teach because his mechanics are so good. He's been told that by every instructor, you've got great mechanics, why aren't I making putts? And you have a guy that's very tough on him and very determined to be one of the best players in the world, and he will be. He's already 5th or 6th, Jamie, in the world. So every player comes with unique battles that you got to deal with. So with McIlroy, a lot of the stuff that I've learned, I told you, is from Rotella. One of the things I know is he was really conscious of his setup when he was at routine. He was really trying to be perfect with his aim, perfect with his club face, all alignment, feet, knees, hips, shoulders, arms. And I couldn't see a trigger to start his swing. So I guess this would be where I'm biased when I watch somebody, is I want to see continuous motion. I want to see continuous motion when somebody putts. And what does that mean? So if you think about other sports that putting is similar to or close to, when Kevin Duffy was showing you Nolan Ryan, right? The pitcher has the ball, he has to start his motion. A tennis player, when they're served, they're not reacting to the ball coming to them, they're starting their motion. A bowler, a free throw shooter. A free throw different than when you're actually playing the game and you have somebody guarding you. So you have to set this putter in motion to hit the ball. I think it's harder to do that when you're standing still and you're dead still and your grip pressure's tight and you're trying to stay still. So with McIlroy, that was my first goal. I showed him how long it took him from when his eyes came back to the ball and then when the putter went. It was a full count of 2 seconds, which in golf is an eternity. And there was nothing that I saw that looked like it was going to get him free. So I had him hit some putts with a lob wedge and blade it. Took the putter and turned it around. He had a Newport-style putter, so he went this way. And he hit 3 putts with a 15-degree, well, no, it was an 18-degree 5-wood. So it was amazing in 1 second, without talking about mechanics at all, how quickly that putter moved and how his flow changed. And if there are instructors here that teach putting, I never like to make statements that use the word never or always. But I would say, I think the most overrated part about putting is where this face is lined up in a dress. Now I'm talking about elite players. You know, if you're an average golfer, I think you got to get it in some range. But the best players in the world have the ability to know where that face is in motion throughout their time and space. And so for McIlroy, who had never really putted, he had never putted with a 5-wood in his life. And we're at 15 feet. And I wish I could show the video here because it's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. It was the greens at the Bears Club were 15 on the stimp meter that day. Jack always cuts them closely for the Jack Nicklaus. For the players going to play at Augusta, so it was Bay Hill, and a week off, then the Masters. So he makes 3 putts in a row with his 5-wood, and he had never practiced it before, so this guy has skill. He has eye-hand coordination. He has speed and strength. And he makes those 3 putts, and I messed up as a photographer. As I'm videoing this, he turned to me with the biggest smile I've ever seen, and I had already stopped the video because it would be something he'd have on every website or every show that he did. And one of the things that I noticed about his putting stroke that was so subtle and so slight was right before he took the putter back, he tapped the grip with his right thumb. It was really small. And I said, okay, that might be his trigger. I don't know, but I want to check. So I went back and looked at the videos from the first few putts we hit before we talked about anything. No thumb movement at all. And then, so here's a philosophical question. If you knew that's what he did when he was in the right space, would you tell him that? Would you remind somebody what they're doing subconsciously so that it becomes conscious? And I did. I didn't know if it was right or wrong, but I showed him that. And he goes, that's amazing. And he goes, should I be thinking about tapping my thumb? What do you think the answer is? So when your head's in the right space, I believe that should happen naturally. Now, not everybody has a trigger of a right thumb, but I see the best putters in the world, players I like the most, are usually in continuous motion. Feet are moving, fingers are moving, tapping the grip. Sometimes there's a slight grip press, sometimes there's a light forward press. And again, this would be my preference. When that eyes get back to the ball, there's very little dead time right there. That putter's got to move back. And if you see numbers on blast or any technology, you try and stop and start your stroke having been still for 2 or 3 seconds and make those numbers as consistently as when you're in a nice flow state. I don't think you can do it. So just to end this story, because I could talk about McIlroy all day, and I know he's probably on everybody's favorite list of golfers. We decided to have a putting contest at the very end. And we got on, at the Bears Club, it was funny how there were no holes close to each other, so the closest ones were maybe 30 feet, 35 feet like these. And there was a hole here and a hole there. We were putting at the same time. Back and forth, whatever you want to call this game, look and shoot. And I said, Rory, the only rule here is no practice strokes, 1 look and go. So these greens are fast, it was windy. I got off to a 4-2 lead playing to 5. And I said, okay, is this good if the teacher beats the student as he's leaving the next morning? So I said to him, I mouthed off, I said, hey, listen, when you go win Bay Hill this week, when you go win Bay Hill this week, you got to tell everybody Brad Faxon gave you a putting or beat you in a putting contest. And he laughed, he kind of smirked, and he made 3 of the next 5 to beat me 5-4. And it pissed me off. And then he gave me a hug and he said, I'm going to tell everybody when I win Bay Hill this week that I beat you in a putting contest. So it made me think about a few things, because he said to me, he goes, you know what's amazing? He says, I haven't had a putting contest, this is 2018. I haven't had a putting contest since 2010. And I was amazed the guy could remember 8 years. How do you know it wasn't 2011 or 2008? He goes, well, that's easy. It was with Tiger Woods in 2010 at Pebble Beach. So when we grew up playing, right, that's all we did was have putting lessons. And I'm aging myself here. I'm almost 60. And those things are gone. I look at players now on practice putting greens on the tour, and they have 3 or 4 devices with them. They have their caddy. Most of them have an instructor. And I don't know if they're getting themselves more prepared to play and putt great. The art of the putting game is gone, in my opinion, and it's got to come back. And I know that a lot of the teachers here that do junior golf, you got to come up with games for your kids to play so they can learn. And not to take away with, the importance of practice and the time that you practice. But that was, a remarkable thing for McIlroy. He went and won by 4 shots. I think what really helped at the time too, and this is what's happened in this age, McIlroy was working with another instructor. He had a contract with Phil Kenyon. Before we left to go out to the putting green, I said to him, Rory, you'll never see me post anything on any social media. I'm not going to talk about any of the work we've done together until you do. And if you decide to say something, then I'll say something, but never before that. For a player, that's a relief, right? I see a lot of instructors now posting all their videos of their strings. And granted, when you're an instructor for a living, that's different than me. Like, I still do a little television, do a few other things. But Jim McLean gave me another piece of advice. Eddie, I think you'd love this too. If all you do is tell everybody what you're doing with your golf swing, at some point you're going to run into somebody who doesn't like what you're doing with your golf swing, who's going to create more doubt. So when Harvey Penick told Ben Crenshaw and Don Kite, go to dinner with good golfers and good putters, you didn't want to talk too much about technique and throw it out there for the public. There's a bunch of tour players I see now that will post their swings, which get a lot of views and maybe good for the sponsors, but when you see the reaction from these people, and you don't know who half these people are, say, well, why are you doing that? Why is your left arm so high? Why is your club face open? And then I see these players reply to those. How can that make you better? How can that make you better at all? So that's really kind of what happened. McIlroy putted great that week. It was probably the first time in 3 years he'd hit it worse than he putted, and scored better than he hit it. And it was a great opening. And I'm proud of this, because I don't know a lot about the technical parts of swing. The stroke. I'm learning. But he had the best putting year of his career this year. He was 24th in strokes gained putting after having been outside the top 140. That's a big change. That's a big change. And his stroke gains number this year all around have only been eclipsed 3 times in history, and they were all 3 times by Tiger Woods. So it's nice to see. Jamie was nice enough to ask Patrick, I don't know, you asked Patrick to come see me earlier this year. And the hardest students you get are players with the best swings and the best strokes. Now, Patrick had help from a lot of different instructors, and every single one of them told him, boy, you got great mechanics. You should be making more putts. And boy, when you talk to someone like that, I mean, sometimes you can give one little thought that gets rid of a lot of them, but he didn't have a lot of thought, he didn't have a lot of feels, but Patrick had been dealing with some slow play stuff. We worked on routine and getting that continuous motion going, and when you watch him standing up there, I love how he's finding the ground all the time with his feet. He does it on his full swings. He doesn't have a big waggle when he stands over the ball, but Jamie, I've never seen anybody with more of a complete game than he has. and somebody is determined. And when he came back from his back injury and played 11 events, never played more than 1 week in a row, and made the top 30, right? Made it into the FedEx Cup finals. That's remarkable. Nobody can do that anymore. Okay, so how can I help you to putt better? And feel free if you want to ask any questions. But what I like to do when I have somebody for the first time is I like to get them on a putting green and find a 10-foot straight putt. So I want to challenge them the right way. So look, you get one chance to find this straight putt and see how they're reading the greens. Is because to me, when I look at somebody, I want to see how they do with the pre-shot routine, and then the skills of, aiming the ball, aiming the putter, hitting in the right distance, and starting it somewhere on your line. And then the most important thing to me is how do you respond after you hit a putt? How do you react? What do you do when you make a putt versus what do you do when you miss a putt? I think it's the least talked about part about the game, right? I bet you guys can all come up with some funny things for what you say and what you do after a putt. But it's amazing to me how the greatest players in the game can get so mad when they miss a putt and react so badly and carry that with them for a long time. But it's also amazing to me how the players, like, let's just take Colin Montgomery. When I was playing with him at the Masters one year, we played a practice round, and he wanted to talk about putting. And he said to me, if I miss a putt on the first hole, I'm done for the day. If I miss a, how about that? You got 4 hours to go. Done for the day. I said, what happens if you miss the fairway on number one and hit in the right bunker? He goes, no problem, I'll hit it down the middle of the next hole. So how do you respond? It's a huge part of this game, isn't it? And you're always better at one part of it than the other. So I have a spot marked. I make the player putt it from there, see if they can get 10 foot and straight. Am I doing okay over there, or is it going to break? Went a little right. So it's funny, my caddy always said to me when I asked him to help read a putt, I had a caddy named John Burke, Cubby, for 14 years. I said, will you read this for me? He goes, the only thing I read is the sports page. That's what he used to say. But every putt I had that I had him read was always a putt like that one. It was an inside left or a left edge putt. I was always biased to being just on the wrong side of that one. So if I missed that putt to the right, everybody knows if I want to find straight, I got to go which direction. Yeah, take a step. So that's how I start. I want them to find straight. I see if they're close. And then I say, you can do this on every single putting green you go to, anywhere you play. You can do it on any green you play any round on, find a straight putt. And then if you can find straight, you're pretty much going to be able to find right to left and left to right. So that's where I begin. I like to video their strokes from face on and from down the line before we talk about anything. I gave a lesson one year to Yanni Singh when she was just fallen off, her top player on the LPGA Tour. She was maybe the most talented lady professional I'd ever seen. And she was so frozen and so tense over a golf ball, and I never videoed it because an hour later it was a different person, and I wish I had showed that. So I always like to see the before and always like to see the after. And then work on whatever it is with the difficulty or the players having with their stroke. Ask them maybe what their tendencies might be. Do you tend to miss right, left, short, or long? Do you tend to putt better for a certain type of putt? Why do you think it is that players putt better for par than for birdie if it's the same putt? Is that mechanics? I don't think so. It's what you're thinking about, right? So can you make every putt? And I think that the most satisfying part of my career is being a good putter for a long period of time. I told you earlier about my strokes, my putting stats getting better as I got older, and everybody thinks that you can only putt well when you putt when you're young. But strokes gained started in 2002 or 3, and I was playing a little bit of a lighter schedule then. I had some knee issues and had some surgeries, but when they started strokes gained, because I was always given, everybody said, well, you never hit it on the green in 2 anyway. You hit it so badly, you're always chipping it close. And then the green, don't laugh at me. And then the green in regulation stat was more of an indicator, but then strokes gained was really the true indicator of what a player does, throughout the season on all lengths of putts, regardless of whether you hit the green or not. And I was in 2003, 4, and 5, and I was 42, 43, and 44 years old then. There were 2 players in front of me, Luke Donald and Tiger Woods. So you can still putt great when you're older, right? You can still putt great when you're older, and a lot of it's attitude. A lot of it's mechanics. But I would take a guy with shaky-looking mechanics and great attitude over great-looking mechanics and shaky attitude. True? 100% of the time, right? And if you look at styles of the greatest putters in the world, let's pick them. Jack Nicklaus, right? Who ever bent over more than Jack to hit a putt, stood over a putt longer than Jack? And who's ever copied him? Nobody. Why? Michelle Wee came pretty close a couple of years ago, didn't she? Ben Crenshaw, more upright, looped the putter around, hit it off the toe. Nobody's really copied him. Tom Watson was one of the great putters. Seve Ballesteros had the toe way up in the air. Only a few players of late have looked so much similar, like Jason Day and Tiger Woods look pretty close to the same. It's fun watching those guys, but they look mechanical. Jason Day and I did a Q&A last year at it's called the Dell Technologies Championship. And Jason Day had an incredible year putting 2 years before with Jordan Spieth, where they made more putts from 20 and 30 feet than anybody in the history of the game. And in this particular Q&A, Jason Day was fantastic. He was very open about his practice schedule. He says he practices 2 hours every single day. He charts every single putt that he hits from every single distance, so he knows what his percentage made of every putt he hits. And practice was, I had my jaw open. I couldn't believe that anybody could do this and work at it so hard, especially a guy with a bad back. And I left that night thinking Jason Day is going to win this tournament hands down. He missed the cut by 10 shots. The game doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So when I go to practice, let me get one thing out of my golf bag real quick. I've been with the Titleist company for 35 years, and I can't say this with absolute certainty, but I think I was the first guy ever to use a line on the ball to putt with, because nobody did that. It was probably pre-Sharpies. But I always like to have the line on the ball when I putted. And this is a great debate among players, isn't it? Is the line good or is the line bad? So I'm trusting that I'm getting this in a pretty close place to being straight. And I want to show you and verbalize what I do when I putt. And it's amazing to me. I have the video of some of the greatest players in the world. I ask them to tell me what they do when they putt. So they're, in a way, verbalizing their images, right? They're telling me what they're going to do. And I whenever I did a clinic where there was full swing, I'm going to hit a high draw, I'm going to start it here, hit it there, I'm going to hit a low cut. I was way better at when I was telling somebody what I was going to do at making the putt. And it's been amazing having watched a lot of players do this, that I could do that with a putter and watch other players do it too. So if I'm going to read a green, I like to start from behind the ball always. But it starts way before that. It starts as soon as you walk up in the green. It starts with your feet. I know Mark Sweeney from Aim Point has taught so many players how to use their feet to read the greens. I know the system a little bit. I don't know it intimately. I'm an old, I call Aim Point the old school plumb bob. And I still see some of the players doing that. So if a putt's left to right, I've learned that I read left to righters better on the other side. If a putt's right to left, I read it better from behind the hole. If it's straight, I'll always look from both sides. But I love to be more under the hole reading a putt than over the hole. That's pretty obvious. Stockton talked about that in his book. And then once I've got the ball set behind here, I want to make my routines the same on every single putt I hit throughout the day and throughout the week. So my first putt I'm going to hit on Thursday is going to be the same putt I'm going to hit on Sunday afternoon. As I walk into the putt, I've visualized, so I still have that action track in my mind from when I was a caddy at Rhode Island Country Club. I have that extension of the line on my ball for my start line. And like I said to you before, I think that the most overrated part of putting for great players is what are the putter faces at address. And Blast will show you that if I hit a few putts here, that I close the face more coming through than when I take it back. You got numbers up there, Chris? All right, so pressure's on the young guy right here. So as I approach from the side, I'm seeing the extension of this line down my line. It's amazing to me, and I love this, how many players use their right hand first and have their left hand on their thigh to get some kind of a feel. Then the left hand goes on. I make a practice stroke without my left foot in position. I place the putter down behind the ball, but again, even though I have a line here and I have a small dash on the top line of my putter, I'm not really consciously trying to aim the putter, I'm just putting it down. When I put that down, I look at the hole once, I put my left foot in here, and I look once, and then I go. And I'm still missing the green, reading the green, right? So I missed the green twice that way. But that's my routine every single time that I play this game. And I get an enormous amount of help from the caddies of the players that I work with, or the instructors of the players I work with. I talk to Jamie for a ton before I talk to Patrick. How does his mind work? What does he think about? Is he more pictures, guys? What does he see? How does he see? What are the words that he uses? So when I talked to McIlroy's coach, his guy named Michael Bannon, who's been his instructor, his only instructor for 40 years, he said the best work we do is away from the tournaments. The best work we do is away from the tournaments. I give Rory 2 or 3 thoughts and let him decide what he wants to do. Now, isn't that a novel idea? Instead of the teacher telling what he has to do, he lets the player decide what his feel should be. I love that. How do we do in that number? Did you get it? All right, I'm going to see if I can read a putt right here, and I'll go through my routine again. So I got the line, one putt, one stroke. Putter's down behind the ball, set it, look, and go. Little forward press, and for the 4th consecutive time, Faxon misses it to the right. So if I'm supposed to be one of the best putters in the world, I still can't read a green out here. There must be an invisible mountain pull, as Paul Azinger would like to say on Fox. Has anybody heard him say that? Invisible ocean pull, he said at Pebble Beach this year. How'd I do with like my little tempo there, my 10-footer?
0.54 backstroke time, 0.29 forward stroke.
0.5. So Blast came up with this this science, it's not an idea, of the timing of the stroke, right? And that there should be an ideal number that a ratio is close to 2 to 1. My numbers have always been like 1.9, 1.8 or 1.9. So I have a little bit faster backstroke than 0.6, and then I get right about 0.3 for my timing of my it's the stroke to impact, right? It's the downstroke to impact, and not all the way to follow through. So what I liked about Blast and being able to measure is, number one, it doesn't affect, it's not like the big SAM weight that's on the shaft that affects the shaft. I can get immediate feedback on a putt. So do you have the open to close there, face rotation?
Rotation change with 0.5 close.
0.5 closed, and I missed it to the right. So like Tiger Woods, I'm a right aimer, and I don't know if that right aim starts from just where I put the putter down or if it starts with my forward press. I don't really care. All I know is I'm going to slam that door shut when I come through and feel like that toe's closing. Look once, look twice, forward press, and go. Finally. And that ball rolled pretty nice. How do we do? Yes. I felt pretty nervous on these things, actually. This is a bigger gallery I've played in front of in 30 years. Yep, so backstroke time was fast. I'm on the faster side, but 0.3 follow through right there. My tempo was just a little quicker than normal. So now, what I see in a 0.4 closed on my follow through. So there is some rotation going through that you want to have. And the numbers here, the formulas for the length of your stroke and how much the putter should open and close. It's opening a degree every inch, right? So it's a great measurement tool. I think these numbers should be pretty similar if you're hitting a putt across the green. If I'm going to hit it to that putter there, I hope I don't miss this tee here. It should be pretty close. Come on. Not bad. So how do we do?
Good. 0.51 again.
0.51, identical to the 10-footer. So the tendency of the best players in the world, through all the information, Blast has over 250 tour players information, and I'll get to you one second. Over a million strokes? Or over a million strokes. The tendency of the best players in the world is they get slower on the long ones and faster on the short ones. Pretty true? So if your distance control's off and you notice your stroke was a little bit slower, go a little bit faster. Question?
How much, so you use a line of the ball. Does the line look straight to you or does it look crooked?
That's a great question. So I was just asked, I use the line on the ball. Does the line look straight to me or does it look crooked? Now, all of us have experimented with that. You know, I've had some people, what do you see? They go, I see dead people, right? People think. Right, so when I first started to use the line, and I'll never forget that the first significant putt I made to win a PGA Tour event was the 91 Buick Open. And I had a line on the ball, and the line I drew on this ball is probably a Tour Balata. When I was behind the ball, I knew that line, you know, your binocular vision, I could see right down where I wanted to go. When I got over the ball, it fell to the left. I've always felt like that line feels left to me. But I know from back here that's correct. So I learned that I've just got to trust that it's right. And I've learned to now feel like, even if it feels a little left, it's probably correct for me. And I know some people that think it's to the right. I think a lot of it has to do how close or far away from the ball. If you stem the ball farther away from you, the line will tend to look more to the right. If you get it closer to your feet, it's going to look more to the left. I also know that when I stand up to putt, my eye line's tilted. It aims out to the right. But every picture I've ever had in a pro-am, you know, with your four best friends, your four new friends, my eye's right, eye's always lower. So I have that just built in there. So I tried for a long time to go, which felt cockeyed, you know, left eye lower than right. Pulled every putt, couldn't do it. So that I get nervous with trying to be too perfect with everybody's setup. You know, I see mirrors out here. It's a great gauge. So McIlroy loves to use the mirror, and he's figured out he putts his best eyes slightly inside the ball, not on it. Eyes slightly behind the ball. But I like those things to be the beginning part of when you go to putt. But when you're getting ready to go on the golf course, I don't like the devices out there. I think you got to learn to go through this routine that you go through. Yes?
How much is angle of attack in importance to you?
How much is?
Angle of attack, up versus down?
Well, the question was, how much is angle of attack when you putt? Now, if you have a negative angle of attack when you're putting, you're in the minority, right? There aren't many people that are hitting down on their putts. I'm not saying that you can't do that. I mean, the older players or the older putters with lots of loft that had more pop stroke definitely had more of a descent in their putting, but I always think that it's 1 to 2 degrees going up. And I'm learning that from some of the great instructors that I've been around, some of the technology I've seen. But I give a lot of credit to guys like Kenyon and David Orr. Stan Utley's taught me an awful lot. A lot of great putters. So, you know, if you have your putter sold when you go, and there aren't many people that don't have it sold. Nicholas didn't, maybe, or says he didn't. Fowler lifts it up right before he goes. But in order to hit the sweet spot of the putter and the sweet spot of the ball, putter's got to be raised some amount, doesn't it, depending on the putter. So I think it's got to be just slightly up. I prefer 1 or 2 degrees of launch on that, of upswing. So any other questions? I have no idea what time it is.
Got 15.
15 more minutes. Talk a little bit about pressure putting. Yeah, that's a great question. We've all putted for under pressure, and we've all. Let me move away from that speaker. We've all felt nervous over putts. I felt nervous over these first few because that's good, and then you always make it. You always hit it firmer than you would, and if you didn't make it, you scoop it up and you walk away, and you don't think about just missing it. But when you're on the course, you know, you tighten up, you take longer, try harder, you squeeze harder. So you got to practice being able to feel what it feels like to be in this flow out on this putting green before you could ever dare to take it out on the course. And I was talking about how I got a lot of information from caddies. I was helping a tour player back when I was still playing on the regular tour. Let's call him Greg. And Greg was a big, strong guy. It was getting towards the end of the year. It was he's just out, tournament just outside of Syracuse, beautiful golf course. And I had asked him a lot of the questions I was asked any player, but he was struggling on the course, putting better in practice, putting better in pro-ams. And he showed me his whole routine, what he goes through, and his caddy was a funny Australian guy named Mick. And this guy, Greg, was putting on a clinic, making everything on the practice putting green. And I said to Mick, I said, how's he look like that on the golf course? He goes, he takes twice as long. He double checks every read. He gets angry. And we ended up getting paired together a few weeks later at this tournament in Syracuse. We're on the very first hole, and we both have wedge shots into this par 4. And we both hit disappointing shots to about 25 feet. And I was the first one to putt. And the practice putting green that was right by the first green was a newer green that was a quicker green. It had just been overseeded. And I hit this 25-footer. I left it 3 feet short. And my reaction was, wow, that was slow. Greg got up and putted it and left it an inch short and slapped himself on the thigh so hard, I thought he was going to fall down. I thought he was going to have a Charlie horse. And then on the next hole, we both hit good iron shots in there. I was just on the fringe about 12 feet. He was on the green about 11 feet. And I made my 12-footer, but it got to the edge and just fell in. I'm like, all right. And then Greg hit this putt, another one short, and he took his putter and he slammed it into the green where you could let go of it and it would stay there, dirt flying everywhere. So how do you know when you talk to a guy that kind of stuff, right? You got to ask a lot of questions, especially about how do you respond. So is there a difference between respond and react? That's one of the things that helped McIlroy this year. Just that little, you know, the two different words. Reaction to me would be tons of emotion, tons of care. Responding is like, okay, I can do this the next time. And I think my response when I was talking about longevity, I've had that ability to be able to keep this part of the game the simplest part of the time for the longest time, and I feel like it's hugely important in order to be great. When it comes down to pressure putts, that's why you practice this routine stuff. That's why you practice what it's like to feel like you have a putter like a sand wedge. To me, there's no correct way to do this, right? You have to find out what part of the putter you're going to hit it, or the sandwich you're going to hit it on. And I feel like you stop thinking about the result the best way when you're doing stuff like that. And the putters and, you know, the players that I've talked to over time, that they haven't worried about the result, even in the toughest of situations. They were able to go through that routine no matter how much pressure was on them, and fall back on that. Rotella called it rod and staff in one of his early books, and not a game of perfect. And you know, we talk about random versus block practice all the time. Can you practice those situations when you're on the practice green when it doesn't matter, and make them feel like the most pressure you can have? So that's why I like some of these games and exercises to simulate that. So you know, I've showed you what my routine is.
I think one of the things that the players have liked, that I've got good response from, I mean, these top players, men and women, when you're going to play in a tournament day, let's leave all the devices behind, maybe a little check with the mirror, but trust your feels. When you first get out on the putting green, I'd love to see what your instincts are like the first putt you hit. Can you hit a 40-footer without walking around, and just see what your feels are like, and see how good your touch is? I love that, and you can do that on every green you go to for the rest of your life. Even in practice, I make the caddies put a ball down from 40 or 50 feet away and hit that putt. See how close you get. The other thing I like is to get a few balls before you go to the range, before you go to the tee. And some guys like to practice putting before they go to the range, then they'll go to the range and they'll come back and hit a few putts. I think this is one of the best things you can do. And I don't care if you're at 6, 12, 3, and 9, or you're 134, 37, 30, or 930. Hit some of these putts going through your full routine. It's like when you get out on the range and you're just banging balls warming up. And you really haven't tried to hit any shots or shapes, or worried about a ball going into a creek or out of bounds. And then you get up on the first tee and you're like, oh smokes, I got to hit a shot here. And you haven't practiced doing that. That's why I love the old range at Augusta National. You had these telephone poles out there that you could go through. So back to the putting. I love this little exercise, and you don't need a lot of balls to do it. But can you go through your motion here, your routine, take all 4 balls, take your routine, make it flowing, and can you make the routine more important than whether the ball goes in or not? So can you evaluate the routine and not the result? Players have talked about that now for years. So 1 practice stroke, putter behind the ball, put my left foot in, look, and go. I missed. How did I respond? Routine felt pretty good. Let's go ahead and do it again. And I've gone to the practice tee, to the first tee after doing this, when I've missed a few of them and still putted well, and I've made a lot of them and I've putted well. Practice stroke, look at the hole. Putter goes behind the ball, left foot goes in, wiggle my stance. How'd the routine feel? So you know what it's like. Everybody here's played the game. You know, you get up on the first tee and all of a sudden you haven't had to play a shot, you haven't had wind blowing towards trouble. How about on a putting green? You get up over one and you go, oh my God, it's a 3-footer. It's a 4-footer. If it's a 40-footer, it doesn't matter. Can you make the 40-footer feel like the 3-footer, or the 3-footer feel like the 40-footer? Can you keep doing this kind of stuff to practice? And then, Jamie, favorite thing we've talked about, and you've used it. Come on out here for a second. What's that?
I think these people are tired.
Well, they're tired of me. This is an hour. I don't know how people give concerts. One of the things that you said has helped Patrick is this idea of finding some putts with slope. And how'd the numbers look when I went through that routine, Chris?
We were 0.5 close, 0.52 backstroke time.
So they've all been very similar, haven't they? So even though my number's not 0.6, 0.3, my signature's the same. I love to see that. So one of the other great practice exercises, and I think this is what's really helped Patrick a lot, is getting a putt like this. Let's call it 10 feet. Let's call it, how much break we got here, Jamie? A cup to 2, 2 cups to 3? Yeah. So he's putting a coin down here, right about where I'd want the ball to go, over the coin to go in. And you can use a plastic ball marker, you can use a dime. This helps you with reading greens. It helps you with touch and feel, which I think is so easy to do this because you don't have to make perfect strokes here. You know, Pell's, you know, when he talked about the chance of the ball going in the hole most is when it goes 17 inches by the hole. I always laughed at that. I said, well, every time I hit it 17 inches by the hole, Dave, it missed. And he goes, well, you know what I mean. And I go, well, yeah, just making you laugh. So, Jamie, I think that looks pretty good. So that's the apex of the putt, right? So the start line's somewhere out here depending on the speed. So can I hit this putt around the coin and under the coin and still make it? And one of the exercises I like, and I think that both Rory and both Patrick have been great at this, and you can't make it too hard. You don't want to make them 30-footers, but I'd love to see a player make one above and one below consecutively, and then do it from the left to right. It's make 4 putts from 10 feet at different speeds. And it'll be as much challenge as you're going to want to put on a player. So very high there. I still think I can do it. Might be a hair high. So, and it's nice to mark so you're putting from the same spot.
It's a hair high, guys, in California.
Invisible mountain hole. Yeah, so again, I'd like to make all these things, but it also teaches you can hit the ball in different speeds, you can see different lines.
A real life one on this too, so we talked with Brad, and Brad and I have known each other for a long, long time, and we're buddies, and we all just like to rap and talk. And, you know, Patrick had gone to see a bunch of people, and he has this beautiful stroke, and, you know, we were taking him around, which I think you got to do as coaches if it doesn't feel right to you. And I already knew his mechanics in his stroke were good, but you got to take your ego out of it, and you got to go see other people. So I went to see a bunch of other people, and everybody kind of said the same thing. You got this beautiful stroke, but Patrick wasn't making any putts. So, and I've also liked Brad's groove, and I think Brad teaches putting the way that we're teaching golf. So I thought there was a good symmetry there. So anyways, long story short, we got this drill, and Patrick liked it a lot. And there's basically 2 things that Patrick's done. When he was a kid at Virginia, I would putt with my wedge, and he would putt with his putter, and I would beat him, and he would get pissed off. But then he would try to copy the way the ball rolled in. So first thing Brad says to him, and we didn't talk about this part of it, although Brad profiled him pretty good, is Brad handed him a wedge, and, you know, Patrick makes 10 in a row with his wedge. So then we got this kind of high line drill. So now take it fast forward to Friday afternoon in Augusta. Patrick's hit it pretty lovely. Been a little bit nervous that week, maybe just a little bit on edge. Friday afternoon in our warm down, he kind of grooved a little bit. We talked about it yesterday. And then we went out and did this little drill, and we hit it, and it went back when he was an amateur there. He made 9 birdies on the last day, or 8 birdies in the Eagle or something on the last day. And he said, you know, I feel like I'm a kid again. And I said, well, what are you looking at? And he goes, well, I'm just trying to get it on the point and let my stroke hit it on the point. So we've worn this one out. This has been a good one. We gave all you guys that drill yesterday. If you're going to do something, I think this would be the best one. And then Patrick shot 64-68 at Augusta on the weekend, you know, second lowest score, and we had a good chance to win. And it was the first time in a couple years where when he hit a putt, like before he hit the putt, I could walk away and go, well, this one's in. And then I heard everybody clapping.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamie. I can say that nothing that I've said today is something I've made up, or it's something I've learned from players and instructors like you that are here today. And I love this game, and the fact that I played for my whole career, the people I've met, the places that I've been, the courses that I've played, the people that I've gotten to play golf with that aren't even golfers. I love the game. I love that I can help other players play too. It's been remarkable. Happy to answer any questions. I know we've been out here for a long time. Everybody's probably hungry and thirsty. You probably want to see one putt go in this guy hits, right? Go ahead.
What is your grip pressure like, and what is the amount in each hand?
Here's a great question. What was the grip pressure like, and what it's like in each hand? Now, I've never really. Let's just say there's a 1 to 10 scale. And you want to come out here? I'll use you as an example. Come on out here for a second. What's your name? Mike. Nice to see you. So grip pressure, right? Hold on to that sucker. You don't have to hit a putt. Pretend you're going to hit a putt. I'll put a ball down there and make you more nervous. Say you're going to hit it to the putt that I kept, the hole I kept missing to the right on. Go up there. You don't have to hit this. You can pretend you're going to hit it. Make a practice stroke. So now put the putter in my hand and keep your grip pressure when you put the putter up in my hand. So see how I'm pulling on the putter right now. So I haven't moved his arms at all. So there's grip pressure, which is how hard you squeeze on with your hands onto the grip, and then there's arm pressure. So if you soften your arms, let your elbows bend. Watch this. So his arms are softer now, and when I let go of the putter, see how it falls? So now you felt the weight of the putter in your hands, right? You weren't feeling that before, so your stroke, I don't know if that's the way you stroke the ball right then when you putt, but you had arms pretty tight, and I think it's hard to have nice swing and get the putter moving quickly enough with that. So I like to feel like my hand pressure is a 3 or a 4, arm pressure is softer. So if I took the putter from you and said, pull that right here, my arms go with you easily. Twist it. Twist it. You can't twist it out of my hands. Let go. It falls. So that's a great test. It's a great test for full swing as well. Come on. Everybody here gets $1 million if you make this. Yeah, the casino told me that. Everybody.
Go.
Come on.
Go ahead. Bank off that ball.
Pretty good. Were you nervous? I was nervous watching you. Thank you, Mike. We would get better. Awesome. So what was his tempo there? That looked like a short backswing, right? 1.7 to 1. So if you looked at your swing, I would definitely say, using blast, it would tell you, right? That stroke needs to go back a lot farther. So how many inches did he go back in his backstroke there? This is the Crenshaw thing. This is the Davis Love thing. 5.9 inches on his backswing. That's how long he did for a 40-foot putt here? $1 million? Oh!
19.2 inches for you.
What does that mean? Length of your backstroke.
6.029.
That was 6-0.
Yeah, you're 6.029.
So that was almost 2 to 1, 6-0. Now you're monopolizing. We all have a business. Take your putter back farther. Yes. Will I give you thoughts on lead hand low? Okay, so I'm a conventional guy here when it comes to grip, and I love to look at hands that look great on the putter, right? I like thumbs down the shaft. I like when you extend your 2 index fingers, they're parallel to each other. I like to see the heel pad of the left hand on top of the shaft if you're right-handed. Preferences, it doesn't make a difference. There's tons of players now that putt left hand low.